So this morning class, we're going to use a little different finish than you're accustomed to using at school, and what I've also demoed in other videos that we've done. This particular finish is from a company called PCL. This is a catalyzed urethane finish. So you have, in this container, you have the urethane finish itself, and here you have the activator, the acid catalyst. In this particular case, with this product, you mix at a ratio of 4 parts of the urethane to 1 part of the activator. It's really important that you mix it to those specifications, because if you over-catalyze it, it's going to dry too hard and it's going to crack and it look like a piece of porcelain. If you under-catalyze it, it's not going to cure properly and it's going to stay soft. So really critical, the first thing you do when you open up the container is stir this product up, because being a satin, it has a flatting agent at the bottom of it that we need to get thoroughly mixed up before we take it out to where it has that satin finish, which is what we're looking for today. We're going to be applying this to this piece of Sapele. We're using the same formula that we used on the quarter sawn white oak, the Arty dye, and we're going to spray this next. I've already got it measured out here at a ratio of 4 to 1, 4 parts urethane, 1 part activator. We're going to use our little HVLP gun here, our turbine system from the Fuji company. But what we want to make sure is that it's thoroughly cleaned out, which it appears to be. We're going to also strain this material. The last thing I want is a little particle of anything clogging up the tip when we go to shoot this. Now, I didn't thin this at all. I'm applying it at package consistency, which they recommend. They do have a specific solvent for it that you can thin it out if you needed to. But I think for today's purpose, we're going to go ahead and spray it just as it is at a 4 to 1 ratio with the activator. So let me get set up and we're going to spray this next. All right, at this point, we are ready to go ahead and spray our sample. With this particular type of finish, you definitely want to wear a respirator. This is nastier than the nitrocellulose lacquer, so I would highly recommend using a proper respirator. In this case, this one is. So we're going to spray 2 wet coats. We'll spray the first coat, about a medium coat. We're going to let it dry for 1 minute to 2 minutes per the instructions, and then they tell you to shoot it again. So we sprayed 1 wet on wet coat with about 2 minutes in between. We're going to let that dry for a couple hours, and off camera I'm going to give it a light sand and then spray another wet on wet coat with about 2 minutes in between it as well. One of the biggest differences between this type of finish and, say, nitrocellulose lacquer that we've used at school is the durability of a product like this. Much more scratch resistant, much more heat resistant, much more abrasion resistant, and solvent resistant. So I did some tabletops a few years ago for the Getty, and what we did is we used the gloss finish on curly maple, and I put a dye color down first and then sprayed it with this exact finish, and sent them the specs because they wanted to make sure that it would withstand the abuse that they would probably give it, which would be spilling coffee, tea, sodas, maybe adult beverages later in the day. And so this particular product would stand up to sulfuric acid test, which is part of what they do when they test something like this for its durability. Also, this product gives you much more of what they call a mill thickness. That's the amount of finish that's left behind after it cures. So this is going to give you probably at least double to 4 times what you would get out of a conventional nitrocellulose lacquer, because you need to remember, lacquer melts into itself, so you lose about 50% of the build. With this particular product, since it has much more of what they call a mill thickness film to it on each pass that you make when you spray it, it's going to be substantially have more finish on the surface. So an expensive product if you're going to buy it in a gallon form with the activator and the solvent. You're going to spend about $200 for a gallon kit. A gallon kit's going to cover approximately 300 to 400 square feet depending on the porosity of the wood you're putting it on. So it's not an inexpensive finish to buy, but if you're trying to do, say, conference tables like I did, it is a great finish because of the durability factor. So class, you may notice, you'll see these little like indentations, little dents, if you will. And what that is the open grain wood. And what happens is the finish goes down into that. The open grain are like valleys. And Sapele, which is from the mahogany family, is an open grain wood, much like walnut is, much like oak is, teak is. And so those little valleys absorb more of that finish. That finish sits in there, so it doesn't have the same reflectability that the closed part of the surface has. If you wanted this to look like a piece of maple and have that glass smooth finish to it, we would have to use a filler on the wood before we start applying our finish. So the question is, will a third application help fill in some of that? I would probably say that it would still be visible to some degree. So like I say, it's important that when you're doing samples for somebody, you show it like this to where they can see what it's going to look like in its finished state, and then you can give them a price to do a filler before you start putting finish on. Now this is going to dry flatter than it is right now, but you can see after only 2 passes how much finish, how much more mill thickness of this particular finish is than if we were spraying lacquer. So as this starts to dry today, when I spray it again, I will have to lightly abrade that surface and break that surface tension.